Swine flu, the swine flu pandemic. What is it? Well, first and foremost, this pandemic, which was essentially came to global notice in March, is a new strain of the influenza virus. These things generally pop up 3 times every century. And to pick up the pandemic classification, a virus, it's not a reflection of a virus's severity or even its lethality in terms of what it does to you. It has a lot to do with its transmissibility, how infectious it is. And generally when we have these novel strains or novel organisms, these drifts or these reassemblies of the influenza virus, people tend not to have resistance to them. Certain groups less than others. And because we don't have immunity to these viruses, they spread very, very fast. So what we're currently in the midst of is an influenza outbreak that is truly global and is highly infectious, but it is for the most part quite mild. It's far milder, in fact, than most seasonal forms of flu. However, we are seeing in about, for example, 40% of the cases, this is according to the World Health Organization puts out bulletins almost a week, and this week's bulletin was quite clear that about 40% of the deaths relating from swine flu are from those, are in those groups not typically considered most at risk, which is generally people with asthma, pre-existing respiratory conditions, heart conditions, diabetes, obesity, and there might be 1 or 2 others I'm not quite sure about. So we basically have this a virus that has the potential to be extremely serious, even amongst groups traditionally, and we'll get into this in a little more detail, typically classed as not so much at risk, relatively young, relatively healthy as far as common culture consisted people. We also face the prospect that this virus might mutate over the course of the next little while. The 1918 pandemic, which killed more people than any other disease pandemic of any type in history, killing somewhere between 20 and 100 million people, had a very mild spring in the northern hemisphere. And when it came back in the winter, that's when it came back with very significant virulence and killed many, many, many people. These pandemics typically tend to roll in waves, 3 or 4 waves typically over the course of the winter. And you'll find deaths particularly pick up at the beginning of each wave. So basically what we are looking at is a great unknown. We don't know whether this virus is going to prove to be particularly lethal. We do have a very strong sense, evidence, epidemiological evidence, it's such difficulty saying that, would suggest that it's going to come around again in the winter, and that a lot of people are going to catch it. But how lethal it's going to be, we don't know at this juncture. Having said all that, I think one of the things that Sonia and I are pretty clear about is that yes, it's an influenza virus, but fundamentally what it's pointing to is not simply a highly specific response that is directed purely at this pathogen. A conventional response, for example, looks at this profound phenomenon and says, okay, we need to treat this with vaccines and antivirals. But really reflects on a much broader sense and understanding of societal health and individual health as a whole. And that what it's really pointing to is, as we say in permacultural terms, profound opportunities for us to look more deeply at our health and how to make ourselves healthier through time, in a much more general sense. And I think that maybe that's a relatively kind segue for you to pick up on now, which start.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I guess I'd just take it from there and agree and say a little bit of what I was saying to you earlier, is that to me, as I've been talking with people that are concerned about this and getting little first aid kits ready for family members and loved ones, is that really I'm not working with anybody any differently as I do when they come to me and say, well, these are all the things that are going on. I'm talking with people about the basic fundamental things of health. Are they well hydrated? Are they getting enough exercise daily? Are they finding joy in their life? What's their stress level, and are they doing things to combat stress? How's their digestion? Of course, digestion is a key one. And how often do they get colds and flus? And then we go into talking about ways to nutritionally and herbally support immunity. There's a few other things, talking with people about potential food sensitivities. Lots and lots of people I've found over time have sensitivities to one food or another, and immunity can often be improved greatly by cutting those foods out. And there are also a few supplements, as much as I've avoided supplements being such a plant person over time, I now do have a small handful of supplements that I have been working with people with, really even before the swine flu came on the radar, just to increase immunity, particularly in people who aren't getting, well, even people who do eat a really well-balanced diet. So I can go into specifics about those things, or?
Yeah, I think maybe what we might focus on initially is a sort of a core, whole person, whole foods preventative approach in terms of the sort of the prophylactic side of things.
Right.
Does that say well?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah. When I work with people, I always have them do a food journal, and I look at their diet, and so this is something you can clearly do and probably have done already yourself. And just look at across the board, what are you eating every day, what could potentially be missing,